This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you Episode 3 of Season 2 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, January 16th, 1909. I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford 114 years ago as we read. This issue of the Wardsman begins with the About Town section. At the last meeting of the Grange, it was voted to invite the next Farmers Institute to meet at Westford on Wednesday, January 27th, and choose Leonard W. Wheeler, Samuel H. Balch, and Samuel L. Taylor, a committee of arrangements. The ladies' degree team were appointed as a dinner committee. The Grange band will furnish music, and several out-of-town speakers are expected to respond to some interestingly hot toasts in an after-dinner roundabout. There will be two subjects, one for the forenoon and one for the afternoon, speaker and subjects to be announced. At a special meeting of the selectmen on Monday evening to draw jurors for a murder trial to be held at Lowell, Amos B. Poley, Alfred Hartford, and George A. Kimball were drawn. This was for the trial of Napoleon J. Rivet, who was indicted for murder in the first degree in the alleged murder of Joseph Gailleux, Gaillous. He was convicted, and after an appeal was executed. The trial was reported daily in the Sun in late January and early February 1909. Henry B. Reed, who has been on the retired list without pension, suffering from a mild form of volcanic eruption after the nature of Job of old, is out of all danger from the lava. Many thanks to the doctor who didn't come and the medicine he didn't take. Sounds like Samuel Taylor was not too big on doctors and on pharmaceutical drugs. Horace E. Gould reports having seen and heard a robin redbreast last week Thursday morning, and the weather nearly to zero. We know it is said that the early bird catches the worm, but what worm is fool enough to be out that early and in zero weather? This, with the whippoorwill that was heard last week, makes one feel like grabbing right hold of the plow handles. But then, why hurry? Some folks haven't their corn husked yet. Hold on there, you plow handle men, and let folks catch up. It has been said of old, quote, with all thy getting, get wisdom, end quote. That's a reference to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 17. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. That's the King James Version translation. Now, to modernize this a little and read it right into the public mind, with all thy forgetting, don't forget the dance of the large proportions and tiptoe head music by the Salem Cadet Band, to be given in the Town Hall Wednesday evening, January 20th, under the controlling stimulus of the Westford Athletic Association, that knows no defeat when ball playing is their opponent's trouble. That there will be no weak places in this their annual dance to a finish needs no argument. It is characteristic of their individual constitutions. The family of the Honorable H.E. Fletcher are having their share of colds if they go by shares. On the list are Mrs. Fletcher, 2 boys and 1 girl, and to encourage the thing along and make it a kind of wholesale affair, the hired girl has concluded to join the list. Dr. Wells is trying to lessen the list with Miss Mary Moran as nurse assistant. The next section is called Sociable. As usual, the Unitarian Society had a successful entertainment and supper in the vestry of the church Tuesday evening under the management of Mrs. John Feeney. Good management always catches the public, and they were out for a good time, and none of, quote, heralded by all the trumpets of the sky arrives the snow, end quote, including hail and rain for weather, had the effect to house everybody away from this well-planned and executed sociable. This quote about the snow was from the first 2 lines of Ralph Waldo Emerson's 1841 poem, called The Snowstorm, which begins, "Announced by all the trumpets of the day arrives the snow." The supper was one that everyone naturally fell in line with, and there is no need of arguing the case. The entertainment was also of the same nature, and to mention it proves it, and that can stand alone without argument. The program was as follows. Singing by quartet, Mrs. Seavey, Miss Effie Bennett, Miss Anna Drew, Miss Eva Fletcher, piano duet, Julia Fletcher and Gertrude Hamlin, violin solo, Walter Steele, piano accompaniment, Gladys Fletcher. As fortune teller, Mrs. Carrie Woods was certainly trimmed, both as regards costume and also with that more difficult adornment, the knack of entertainingly knowing how. Reverend Benjamin H. Bailey performed his usual star act, storytelling feat, to help the financial harvest along $30. The next section is the Westford Center section. The art exhibit of the Henry K. Turner Company of Boston at the new Center School Wednesday afternoon was very much of a success. There was a good attendance of interested parents and friends to inspect the fine array of copies from the works of famous artists in a great variety of subjects. The different classes, with the desire to make the financial result as good as possible, had candy, popcorn, and cake for sale, and a pretty tea was served to the guests. This was presided over by Mrs. Alfred W. Hartford and Mrs. William L. Woods. The Center School, of course, was the new William E. Frost School. Miss Gertrude D. Fletcher is at home from a private hospital in Boston, where she underwent last week an operation on her nose and throat. The Edward M. Abbott Hose Company were guests by special invitation of the Firemen's Company in Chelmsford last week Friday. An excellent supper and an evening of general sociability was enjoyed. The next section is the Grange. The first session of Grange for the new year was a successful and enjoyable gathering. It was the installation service for the new set of officers for the year, the names of whom have previously appeared in this column. This work was done with much capability and dignity by Walter E. Morris of Billerica Grange, assisted by Mrs. Lulu Hutchins of the same Grange. The last part of the program was preceded by a supper in the lower hall in charge of Edward A. Hamlin, who scored a real triumph in this line of effort. The Secretary and Treasurer rendered full reports showing the good condition of the order and further showing the accuracy and faithfulness of these two officers. The membership at present is just 1 or 2 short of the 200 mark. The newly installed lecturer, Edson G. Boynton, announced that the next meeting would be a roll call and that bright responses, preferably not too long, would be expected from each one present. He also said that the new programs for the year would be ready for distribution at that time. The annual meeting of the Congregational Church, with dinner and roll call, was one of the most successful events of this kind that has ever been held. The pleasant weather made possible a good attendance of the members, and promptly at noon the company sat down to a good chicken pie dinner, complete in all its appointments. This was in charge of Mrs. Houghton G. Osgood and a good number of helpers. Then came the roll call by the clerk Leonard W. Wheeler, which was responded to with remarks, scripture quotations, etc., also from absent members substantial manifestations of their loyalty in money. The pastor then called on some of the guests, and Samuel L. Taylor and Fred A. Snow were listened to with pleasure, after which Reverend B. A. Wilmot, pastor of the First Congregational Church of Lowell, the guest of honor for the day, was introduced, and he gave an address the truths of which will long be retained by his hearers. He made some comparison of the city and country church problems. He deplored the evidence of class spirit by the native New Englander toward the incoming foreigner. While recognizing the value of many other good things in the community, he made a sincere and earnest plea for the church first and making the ministering of the spiritual its supreme function, thereby making strength along other lines an inevitable result. These and many other good points were covered with keen but kindly discrimination. Adjournment was then made to the vestry below, and after prayer by the pastor, the business session was held. Reports from the various officers were given. The treasurer's report showed all bills paid and a balance in the treasury. The members had well sustained their missionary obligations. The trustees reported various repairs for the year, the installing of town water in the church and parsonage, and also in the latter a new bathroom and a new range, and new shingles for the roof. Other material prosperity was the receiving during the year of 2 legacies, one of $1,000 and the other of $300. The following officers were chosen for the ensuing year: Moderator, Reverend Charles P. Marshall; Treasurer, Miss Lillian B. Atwood; Clerk, Leonard W. Wheeler; Collector, Houghton G. Osgood; Auditor, Augustus Bunce; Historian, Mrs. Leonard W. Wheeler; Trustees, Mrs. Lillian B. Atwood, Houghton G. Osgood, Arthur E. Day, D. D. Colburn, John P. Wright; Supply Committee, Miss Sarah Loker, L. W. Wheeler, J. P. Wright, and John A. Taylor. The church mourns the loss by death during the year of Miss Rebecca E. Luce, Mrs. Augusta Butterfield, Mrs. Rachel Dupee, Mrs. Annie Cipher, and Miss Inez L. Burnham. Also the loss by removal from town of several families. After prayer by the pastor and the singing of the doxology, the meeting adjourned with the resolve that with continued unity and loyalty to make the coming year the best ever in prayer and work together. I might mention that the Rebecca E. Luce, Miss Rebecca E. Luce, who passed away that year, was the daughter of the first pastor of the church, the Congregational Church, when it split off from the Unitarian Church in 1828. The next section is the Graniteville Section. All the newly elected officers of Court Graniteville, Foresters of America, were duly installed by Robert J. McCarthy, Deputy Grand Chief Ranger, on Thursday night. The following committee was appointed to make arrangements for a smoker to be held after the regular meeting, which will be held on January 21st. James R. Healy, F. J. Sullivan, Henry E. Leduc. This affair will be for members only, and it goes without saying that there will be a full attendance. Friends of Samuel Boothroyd, who formerly resided here and who left Providence, Rhode Island for the Klondike some few years ago, have received word recently that he is now located in Seattle, Washington, and is doing well. It appears that he was not very successful in the gold fields, but at present has a lucrative position and intends to visit his friends in the East during the coming spring. The reference here was to the Klondike gold rush in Canada. In August 1896, gold was discovered along the Klondike River near Dawson City in Yukon Territory, Canada. When news of the discovery reached the U.S. in July of 1897, it set off the Klondike gold rush fueled by high unemployment caused by the panics of 1893 and 1896. Samuel Boothroyd and his wife, Fanny Gandy, both born in England, were married in Westford in 1881 and were living in Rampart, Alaska Territory in the 1900 census. The next section is called the Temperance Society. Several young men of this village assembled at Healy's Hall on Wednesday evening, January 6th, for the purpose of forming a permanent temperance society. In the absence of Joseph Wall, the chairman of the previous meeting, the meeting was called to order by the secretary, and C.H. McCullough was chosen chairman. It was voted to form a permanent organization to be known as St. Catherine's Temperance Society, and the following officers were duly elected: James B. Healy, president; T. Alfred Hughes, secretary; Omer Leduc, financial secretary; James Spillane, treasurer; Thomas Rafferty, Jr., Henry Charlton, and Thomas Boyd, trustees; C.H. McCullough, A.R. Wall, and Thomas Hughes, committee on laws. This committee will report at the next regular meeting of the new society that will be held in the same hall this week. It was also voted to hold meetings once each month until suitable quarters can be secured for the members to gather every night. It is hoped that all the young men of St. Catherine's Parish will take advantage of the opportunity and join this Temperance Society. The next section is the Forge Village section. The school teachers of this village held an art exhibit Saturday afternoon in Cameron School, which was largely attended by parents and friends. Candy and popcorn were contributed by the children, and it found a ready sale. Sunday, January 17th, will be observed by the Episcopal Church here as Missionary Day for the Sunday School and church together. Services at St. Andrew's Mission will be at 3:45 instead of at the usual hour. The congregation will occupy one side of the church, and Messrs. Richards and Roosevelt will have charge of the Sunday school on the opposite side. There will be special music, and Reverend T.L. Fisher will speak of good work done by the missionaries. The public is cordially invited. Which Roosevelt this is, we don't know. It was probably one of the sons of Theodore Roosevelt, or possibly FDR, but we can't tell from this. They all were students at the Groton School at one time or another. Mrs. Nutting of West Groton is visiting her son, Elmer E. Nutting, and wife for a few weeks. The Ladies' Sewing Circle met with Mrs. George L. Sanborn last week, Thursday afternoon. Quite a number were present, and Mrs. T.L. Fisher, the pastor's wife, of Ayer, met with them, showing much interest in the good work the circle is doing. The Happy-Go-Lucky Social Club of this village held a social dance in Abbott's Hall last week, Friday evening, which was well attended. Music was by the Precious Orchestra, and all seemed to enjoy the evening. This was the first of a series to be given by the club. The Precious Orchestra was composed of members of the Precious family of Westford, and they lived in the house that's just to the south, I guess it is, of Cameron Senior Center. Now, the Ladies' Sewing Circle contributed quite a sum of money toward payment of the horse sheds recently built in the rear of the mission house. If you see old pictures of this or several of the churches, you can sometimes see horse sheds next to the building. This where people could park their horses and perhaps their carriages during Sunday services when the weather was bad. St. Andrew's Guild held the first meeting of the year at Recreation Hall Wednesday evening, January 6th. After the regular business was transacted, the following officers were elected for the ensuing year. President, Reverend Thomas L. Fisher. Vice President, Mrs. Richard D. Prescott. Treasurer, Miles Collins. Secretary, Bertha Collins. The musical event of the season in Forge will be the annual band concert Wednesday evening, January 20th, in the Mission Recreation Hall. The popularity of the Groton School Orchestra under the leadership of Clifford S. Griswold will ensure an enthusiastic audience. The summer music of the whippoorwill was heard in the early twilight hours of Wednesday morning in the woods of Tadmuck Swamp. There was a large and interesting Farmers' Institute held at Tingsboro Wednesday with a modern, up-to-date address on best methods of poultry management, given by Reverend William H. Davenport of Coleraine, who is a success in the business. Keep your hen houses wide open in the wintertime was one radical point. Among those attending from Westford were Leonard W. Wheeler, Samuel L. Taylor, Otis, and Albert Day. Otis Day was actually a poultry farmer here in Westford at the corner of Cold Spring and Graniteville Roads. And that's the news in Westford for the week ending January 16th, 1909. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Nick Woodbury of WestfordCAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at westfordmuseum.org or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from a century ago. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.